Hey, hi, welcome to my channel. Today I'm not going to do too much rambling because I already took a quick peek ahead and saw that this is a pretty long read for a chapter. Let's just get right into it. Today I'm going to be reading chapter, I believe this is 12. Yep, 12 of the Edgar Cayce Guide to Self-Healing. I'm not going to give the spiel because you guys know that my book is old and janky. Let me go right there. Back cover as well. Bada boom. Alrighty, let's just get right into it. I'm so sorry, y'all. I'll be honest. It's like 1 in the morning and I'm filming. Little lady went to bed late, so I'm filming late. Chapter 12, The Impact of Feelings and Self-Healing. The readings of Edgar Cayce place a great deal of emphasis on the health of attitudes and emotions or feelings. Seldom does the master healer mention a case where the attitudes and emotions of the entity are not considered and touched upon in detail. As we can easily see, the self-healer must not only have the proper ideal and purpose, but he must also have the correct attitude and emotions. Some say that these four are the foundation of an individual's pyramid of soul growth and healing. In this chapter, we would like to consider the basic emotions of fear and love. The Bible tells us that perfect love casts out fear. So if we are to have our emotions in proper order, it would be to our benefit as self-healers to consider these two major emotions. As Cayce says, the emotions are the conditioner, and as such, they have a great deal to do not only with our effectiveness as self-healers, but also with the balance and stability of the entire entity. Cayce speaks of the emotions at various points in the following citation. The emotions act as the pulsators of glandular function, giving the impulse to the nerve centers, and thus the function will vary according to the type of emotion or origin of the impulse. To shed some more light on the problems of the emotions, let me quote further from Cayce. Do not allow the worry of healing to overshadow spiritual development or ideals. Do not think that these may be separated or that these may be run as one. No. Each in its own sphere, each in its own pace, apart yet ever with the same ideals. For it is in the application of self to business that understanding of your business comes. Spiritual knowledge comes through application as well. Remember, thou art the God within thine own self that through choices may make or break thine own spirit to accomplish that which is set before thee. If spiritual purposes are set, then it is ever true, I am with thee, and will not forsake thee, even though thou art compassed about by shadows, doubts, and many rabble. Then keep thine heart in attunement, and every condition will open at the right time, place, and manner. Keep thyself right, and all will come out well. Two emotions that Cayce mentions in passing ought to be considered before we get into the notion of fear and love. Those two are anger and worry. Cayce calls anger a madness and a poison, and he felt that worry was a sheer waste of time. Anger is madness, certainly poison to the system. This should be a warning for every human. For anger can destroy the brain as well as any disease, for it is a disease of the mind. Do not burden self with that, as it is unnecessary to be met until the time arises, for worry killeth. The body gets sufficient rest if it didn't worry. Worry is harder on the body than lack of rest. See and know that worry will only unfit and prevent the body from meting out the best in self and for others. It is easy to say, don't worry, but how may a person prevent it? By keeping control of the mind, not only through the very will of self, but by keeping occupied in doing something for others. The self-healer must avoid condemning self or putting self down. This only weakens his position of strength in terms of an effective healing. In the mental forces, we find self-condemnation. The mental forces of the body must of its own accord lay aside those condemnations and be awakened to the elements within self of the divine. Cayce places a great deal of emphasis on the unity of mind, body, and spirit. He also tells the self-healer that it is through the mind that he can contact the divine power within self so as to bring about health and balance in the body. Because he was so sensitive to the power of the mind, Cayce often warned of the crippling effect fear can have on the mind. If we are fearful, we will not even attempt to practice the teachings of self-healing that Cayce shares with us. We will ignore them and vitiate, V as in Victor, ITIATE, any effectiveness that God may have given us in this area of self-healing. We will hem and haw, procrastinate, and sink into deep depression rather than call upon the natural powers that we are all blessed with. Realizing ourselves that fear is a mind crippler, we ought to pay close attention at this point to Cayce's observations on fear and see whether or not this heinous disease has a resting place in our hearts. If it does, our first act of self-healing will be directed towards our mind, ridding it of what Cayce calls the greatest destructive force to man's intelligence. For fear puts the body at a disadvantage, keeping it from meeting the needs of the hour. Fear, if not understood or controlled, will eventually destroy us. Fear leads to uncertainty and doubt, two things that no self-healer needs. Cayce believed in psychological projection, so he lashed out at fear because people who are fearful see within other individual personalities their own fears, doubts, and negativity. As a man soweth, so shall he reap. As an attitude is held towards another, that is gradually builded within self. The results of fear to the physical body are well known to each of us. What frightened us most as children, or now as an adult? Doesn't fear still make one physically ill? Doesn't fear leave a person emotionally or mentally shattered? Through the blood supplying force, we find the blood has been overcharged with those elements thrown off in the circulation by fear. Fear, then, in that sense, is not well for a general physical condition of the body, but when a body as in this condition adheres to the general principles, that is, if there are good eliminations daily, sufficient exercise, physical, mental, and spiritual, and even balance or coordinate activity kept, we may live a full life expectancy. When we are fearful, the complexion becomes pale and anemic. The pulse becomes weak, irregular, and rapid. Circulatory equilibrium tends toward edema and local stagnation and is poor and chilly. Capillary contraction is spasmodic and irregular. Perspiration is checked, elimination decreased. The gait becomes dragging and slovenly. The carriage is stooped and weak. Expression is downcast, and the desire to achieve is greatly decreased. Known as has been given of old, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, but the fear of man is the indication of weakness in the body man. One of the greatest hindrances to the body is fear, not of others, not of mental ability, not of that which the body desires, but fear in the physical innate forces of the body. And while often one's outlook upon life is altered by the conditions of the liver or of the digestive system in this particular body, while these conditions exist, fear produces almost as much harmful effect as this particular physical condition. While there may be applied that for the body that will overcome physically those deficiencies, yet unless that basic force as is present in the fear of the body is removed, these physical deficiencies would certainly return to hinder the body again. In casting out same, replace grudge, hatred, and kindred conditions, products of fear, with the love of the master. Fear takes many forms and walks in many guises. In its most fundamental form, we recognize fear as those vague feelings of discomfort and uneasiness that so many label as worry or anxiety or stress. We somehow attribute an unfortunate outcome of something to some indeterminate time in the future, with ourselves being the principal participants and recipients of these nameless problems. Where Were we honestly to confront ourselves and to list all the times these terrible things did not materialize against all the times they actually did, no one would be more amazed at the incredible balance than ourselves. The divine healer does not want us to be fearful. He does not want us to handicap ourselves. For as is understood, he does not will that any should perish. Fears arise only because we don't trust him in ourselves. We think less of our powers and talents than we ought to. Fears arise, therefore, and these beget those influences that prevent proper attunement. However, we are all human, and we do have our hidden and overt fears. We do have unpleasant and unhappy feelings, and we long for some way to pick ourselves up from our fears. Once we understand what we are doing to ourselves when we allow fear to grip us, to immobilize us, then we are in a better position to pull ourselves up from its quicksand. We are better equipped to know how to deal immediately with the situations as they confront us from day to day. It is said that basic to all forms of fear is the sense of feeling helpless and alone. A frustrating figment covers us, and we see ourselves as being weak and not able to cope with what God, life, and chance send our way. We really have a sense of incompleteness as though our Creator were far from us, and so often this sense of alienation, abandonment is reflected in our attitude of being lost, separated from parents and loved ones who in a limited sense are surrogates for the perfect love we left behind. Fear, which is at times one of the most devastating of all emotions, no doubt stems from past experiences which are buried deep within our subconscious. Some of these fears are really foolish and defy explanation in the present, yet they had a very real root in the past. So Cayce recognizes the following excerpt indicates in explaining fear of knives. In this same place where the entities spent the days in Persia at the time of Cayce was where the life was taken by the invading forces from the south and east. Hence, in the present, the aversion to cutting instruments, for in that manner the destruction came. We do, however, have a very real part to play in our own development as self-healers and in our future. In one situation or another, we attract to ourselves that which we will have to face, the lack of self-confidence, the feeling of being less than perfect or inferior. Cayce tells us that the causes of so much fear in a certain entity's life were that the entity lacked sincerity, lacked the coordination in carrying its ideals and purposes into practice in former lives on earth as well as in the present one. The entity's inferiority complex originated from the fear or dislike of men. At another time, he enumerated a patient's physical deficiencies and then said that the patient is afraid of himself. In other words, did not have self-confidence. The self-healer, if he is to avoid fear and its devastation, must at all costs avoid going against universal laws. He must rather attune himself to those laws. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, while the fear to face life is the beginning of disharmony. Not because it makes us hesitant and unwilling, but because fear brings that of contempt first from those that bring same, and then the seed is the dissatisfaction in self and the condemnation of self's position. Those who are about to embark on the path of self-healing should especially avoid fear. As Cayce would say, never be afraid, for fear creates doubt, and because ye doubt others, know it is because others cannot trust you. If ye doubt in this way or that way or manner, look into thy own purposes. Cayce tells us that fear is dangerous to the self-healer because fear obscures our vision of God, the divine energy upon whom the healer so vitally depends. Being afraid is the first consciousness of the entering of sin into the soul. He that is afraid has lost the consciousness of his heritage with the Son of God, the Father, for we are heirs through him to that kingdom that is beyond all of that would make afraid or that would cause a doubt in the heart of any. Through the recesses of the heart, then search out that would make afraid, casting out fear, and he alone may guide. Fear, as we may have already seen, physically manifests in the body and sometimes pulls a person out of the arena of life. Cayce describes this well. The tautness is the Cerebrospinal comes from the from the fear as is from within, and this acting upon the ganglia of the sympathetic and cerebrospinal system often changes the reactions of the physical organs themselves. Not as wrath, not as of malice, but rather that of fear does the reaction show in the system. We don't have to be fearful. We can be free, and that is what self-healing is all about. Nothing drives this home so clearly as the phantom nature of fear itself. Fear, the greatest bugaboo to the human elements, for in fear come those conditions that destroy the vitality of that assimilated. To overcome fear, so fill the mental forces with that of a creative nature as to cast out fear, for he or she that is without fear is free indeed. How can we get rid of our fears? What must the self-healer do so that this emotion does not block his contacts with God? Let fear, let worry be lost in service to others for his name's sake. Use much of the experience of others. Speak out, don't fear. Call on those near and hear what they have to say. There are abilities in abundance and the entity for activities if they are out into use from the seed of the spirit of truth, and not from those of hate, malice, jealousy, and the things that make people afraid, the things that cause timidity within the associations and fear. For as has been so often quoted and so little interpreted in people's lives, the consciousness of God's presence as manifested in Christ casteth out fear. Fear is brought by self-consciousness. Cayce tells us in 3357-2. We think in our own heart, and we create those things that make us afraid. But we should take heart, for fear is of the earth. Since this is true, the spirit of truth and righteousness can rid us of our fears. Another root of fear is selfishness. We think that we have to do everything and that therefore we must have everything for ourselves. Cayce tells us to rely on the Father instead. Fear is cast aside by wholly relying upon his promise, that one may demand to be fulfilled. The Father knoweth what ye have need of before ye have asked. Peace is with thee, contentment is in thy hand, whom becomes not afraid, but trust rather in him. Cayce gives two rather dramatic paths to freedom from fear. He notes, fear is the root of most of the ills of mankind, whether of self or of what others think of self, or what self will appear to others. To overcome fear is to fill the mental, spiritual being with that which wholly casts out fear, that is as the love that is manifest in the world through him who gave himself the ransom of many. Such love, such faith, such understanding cast out fear. Be ye not fearful, for that thou sowest, that thou must reap. Be more mindful of that sown. Too long has the entity been, as it were, under a cloud, rather timid, rather lacking in self-expression. It needs to get out in the wilds and yell and hear its own echo back again. Holler, yell more for the fun of it. The body has wanted to many times and never has to the full extent in its whole experience. The entity is not to be subdued by others who try or have tried to impress the entity with their importance, for God is not a respecter of persons, and anyone can act the fool by appearing to be important. Fear, Cayce teaches, can prevent the self-healer from being the full channel of supply for the creative forces. The fear of the material wrecks the material body. That is why fear in self and in the abilities of self must be overcome, even though at times it may seem difficult. We will always be afraid at one time or another. That is only human. But the healer has to recognize what happens to his body and to his total being when he allows fears to dominate. His healing process of the self then must begin with ridding the self of its fears. And certainly Cayce has indicated strikingly enough how this may be accomplished. Shadows and doubts and fears will arise in thy experience, but keep before thee the light of all good consciousness, of all good and perfect service to him, and you will find that the shadows of fear will fall far behind. Let those things that cause fears be far removed from thee, through just the little kindness, the little service ye may do here and there. For remember, these are at war with one another, hope and fear. Let not thy mind, let not thy body, let not thy purpose, thy desire entertain fear. Conquering fear is a daily exercise, says Cayce. It is not something that we are ever finished with. Fear not, it is evidently the psychic attempting to come through. If there is set a definite period or manner of meditation, there may be had a balancing. Let thy mind, thy body be consecrated to the Lord to have his way with thee. Each day purify the body, the mind, as ye enter into that period of communication and prayer and supplication. He will give thee understanding. He will give thee wisdom as to how ye shall conduct thyself day by day. The self-healer need not fear, for he knows from whence comes his power. It is up to him to let that which causes fear in him be dissolved in the willingness, the desire to be of help to others. He knows that he is not alone, for he walks not in the shadow, but in the light of the creative forces of truth. So why should he fear? Since the topic of fear is so vital to self-healing, especially since fear is behind so many psychosomatic diseases, it would be well to go through a series of questions and answers that were put to Cayce at various points in the readings. Let us try to get as much out of the answers as we can for our own self-healing and growth. Question: what is the cause of my fear? Answer: self-condemnation. Question: how may I overcome it? Answer: by seeing the ridiculous, the funny side of every experience, knowing and believing in whom ye have trusted in the Lord, for without the consciousness of the indwelling spirit, little may ever be accomplished. The forces and the fears of phenomena of life oftentimes prevent the entity from accomplishing most by the fear of what others will say. Put this aside. Question: why has the patient a fear of the future? Why does he not want to live? Answer: the natural tendency of the gnawing from within and the pressure created in the upper portion of the system from same distorts the view of the body, as well as those depressions from the associations about same. But with a changed physical outlook, the whole outlook of the body, mentally and physically, will also be changed. Question: how may I get rid of fear of closed places? Answer: the attitude must be kept as to helpfulness and spiritual forces of the body within and without. Question: how can I overcome fear of advancing old age and being alone? Answer: by going out and doing something for somebody else, that is, those not able to do for themselves, making others happy, forgetting self entirely. These are as material manifestations, but in helping someone else, you'll get rid of your feelings. Question: why am I so frightened and apprehensive all the time, so that I fear company and yet fear to be alone? Answer: the anxieties should be controlled by defining or confining self to some particular form of ideal and following through with that. Apply self to the ideal presentation of what spirit, mental body, and physical body represent in the world as found in the 30th chapter of Deuteronomy and the 14th, 15th, 16th, and 17th chapters of John's Gospel. Question: how can I overcome fears that beset me, especially about myself and my wife? Answer: fear is the root of most of the ills of mankind, whether of self or of what others think of self, or how self will appear to others. To overcome fear is to fill the mental, spiritual being with that which wholly casts out fear, the love manifest in the world through him who gave himself a ransom for many. Such love, such understanding casts out fear. Be yet not fearful that thou sowest that thou must reap. Be more mindful of that sown. Question: career as a pianist was brought to an end through my extreme nervousness and lack of confidence, and other talents have suffered because of an overpowering fear. What am I to do? Answer: right about face. Know it is within thee. Defying this has brought the fear, has brought the anxieties. Turn about and pray a little oftener. Do this several weeks, yes, let a whole moon pass, or a period of a moon 28 days, and never fail to pray at 2 o'clock in the morning. Rise and pray facing east. Ye will be surprised at how much peace and harmony will come into thy soul. Question: how can I overcome the social fear which causes me to shun leadership? Answer: this will for the entity, and this ye overcame in the experience before this. Keep it as it is. Don't be a social climber. Don't depend on social activities. Be a home builder. Do not attempt to make a life outside of the home. Question: does the love for a person, even without his knowledge of it, influence or benefit him in any way? Answer: fear, with a mental aberration, always creates activity in the minds of those feared. But love and aptitude for right thinking, right acting bring harmony and quiet that has its effect upon the general activities of a body. Question: how did the entity's inferiority complex originate? Answer: for the fear or dislike of men, you cannot be one who took the vows and kept them and then lightly turn around and try to gratify the appetites of those who are not easily satisfied. Question: why do I feel depressed and lonely at nightfall? Answer: this is the common lot of man. These come as part of the emotions. Very few find that period of the gloaming as the period of expectancy. Many others find it as the period in which they are being left alone. For as we were oft as have been many left at eventide. Okay. Question: how can I overcome fear? Answer: first find self in the relationships to the creative forces. Add to thyself brotherly love, patience, long-suffering, gentleness, kindness, and these will bring within thy experiences a varied concept from that being applied in the present. Better right about face while it is time, else the glory of the Lord may pass thee by. Question: what can the body do to take away fear? Answer: this may only be taken away by losing it in his power, his might, through spiritual and mental concentration upon the self being a channel of the Creator. A person desiring to become a self-healer through the example and teachings of Edgar Cayce now understands that his first task is to deal with fear and eliminate it. But Cayce has clearly demonstrated how this can be done, drawing upon his own religious understanding. One thing we must remember is that it would be foolish to attempt self-healing if our own hearts are filled with doubts and fears. Cayce tells us how to begin our own personal program of self-healing. Let also examine their hearts and minds as to put away doubt and fear, putting away hate and malice, jealousy, and those things that cause men to err. Replace these with the desire to help, with hope, with the willingness to divide self and self-surroundings with those who are less fortunate, putting on the whole armor of God in righteousness. Magnify in the daily life the fruit of the Spirit of truth, that all may take hold and make for that activity in their lives, knowing that if ye do it unto the least of thy brethren, ye do it to thy Maker. For the Lord hath knowledge of thee, for thou art a portion of him. Yes, each soul is a portion of him. Thou art not aware of thy pulse beat until a disturbance arises. So in the mind and heart of thy Maker, thy Creator, when thou art disturbed, he becomes aware of thy disturbing forces. Then keep peace in thy own heart and mind. The next important emotion that the self-healer must attend to is love. We hear so much about love these days, and we all think we are in good shape here. Yet if we have sickness, sin, and problems, and we already know that the root cause is to be found in fear and hate, both of which bring the body into shambles. Cayce teaches us the reality of love by first begging us not to hate. Do not belittle, do not hate, for hate creates and brings turmoil and strifes. As to the associations with others, if ye would have friends, show thyself friendly. This does not mean becoming the butt of others' fun, nor of thy using others in the same manner. But if ye would have love, love others, and let not thine condemnation bring upon thee that ye hate, for that ye hate, ye become. This is the law. Hate brings that which is irritating, especially to those who are creative in other directions. What Cayce is telling us is what we have heard for years and years from pulpit and our own religious training. Perfect love casteth out fear. Where fear enters, there sin lieth at the door. What is it all about then, this need for love on the part of the self-healer? The call for love is a total one, so that no admixture of fear may remain in our heart. The rest of the theories about healing are nothing if one makes sure to live the law of love. What is the law of love? People constantly ask Cayce this question. He always replied, the law of love is giving. It is the action of giving without the urge felt, expressed, manifested, shown, or desired of reward for that giving. Giving. It is illustrated by the injunction, love is the Lord thy God with all thy heart and with all thy soul and with all thy might. In compliance with the law, then, the law becomes a part of the individual, that is the law of love. Not that the law of love does away with other laws, rather it makes the law of recompense, the law of faith, the law of the divine with the law of the earth, not defective but effective. So we have love is law is love, God is love, love is God. Now, if we as individuals upon earth have all the elementary forces which make for the bettering of life and have not love, we are as nothing. Nothing. In a great many ways, the manifestations of the law of love may be shown, but without the greater love, even as the Father gives, even as the soul gives, there is no understanding, no compliance with influences which make of effect our later law. According to Cayce, then, love is giving. It is a growth. Love may be cultivated or it may be spoiled. That of selflessness on the part of each is necessary. Remember the union of body, mind, and spirit, and such as marriage should ever be, not for the desire of self, but as one. Love grows, love endures, love forgiveth, love understands, love keeps those things rather as opportunities that to others would become hardships. Can the self-healer find love then? And find it he must, since Cayce puts such a premium on love as a healing agent. Is there really the desire to know love, or to know the experience of someone having an emotion over self? Is it a desire to be itself expended in doing that which may be helpful or constructive? This can be done, but it will require the losing of self in service for others. But arise to that consciousness that if ye would have life, if ye would have friends, if ye would have love, these things ye must expend. For only that ye give away do ye possess. For Cayce, love is not ownership or the amassing of wealth and power. It is not even possessed, but just is. Let love be with dissimulation, that is without possession, but as in that manner as he gave, love one another, even as I have loved you, willing to give the life, the self for the purpose, for an ideal. Other than this, these become as that which will bring in the experience that in which each will hate self and blame the other. Love in its greatest aspect does not possess, it is. It is not then possessive to be real. Love is not being permissive, letting the client, if it be ourselves, have anything and everything it wants like a spoiled child. In our present permissive society, we see many of the results of parents who have reared their children out of fear and with a misunderstanding of love's true reality. To allow selfish, willful clients free rein is to bring forth the potential of a destructively arrogant, indolent, and resentful, self-oriented person. When you approach the sick bed to bring the powers of healings, you must be careful that you do not misguidedly reverse any natural healing process. That is why the self-healer must be able to recognize the fruit of love as opposed to the wages of sin in the person who is ill. Love is definitely not being intolerant of the self. If anything, Cayce has made it quite clear that the self must be honored and respected. A self-healer without a good self-image would be ineffective, for often we find here and there, as within this entity, unusual aspects. For the entity is more tolerant with others than with self, while the usual, of course, is to excuse self and blame others. This produces within the entity a great deal of latent abilities. Yet there must never be any more of self-condemnation than condemning of others. Nor is love possible if one goes on condemning self, for the self is the source of love, realizing its own relationship to God who is love. There are evidences of unusual abilities with this body if once removed from it the feelings of inferiority or of self-condemnation. Condemn not self, condemn not others. Self-condemnation is often a temptation when a person is sick. Our spirits are low and we look to make ourselves the scapegoat. No healing is possible with this attitude, for there is within self not enough of that seeking to manifest God's will when this thought of self-destruction occurs. Let thy prayer be, Lord, here am I thine. Use me in those ways and manners as thou seest, that I may ever glorify thee. One who has often suffered self-condemnation through the lack of exercising that which it knew to be the correct thing to do or have done at the time, the sin of omission. Do not condemn others, do not condemn self. Self-condemnation for that which is past, that which cannot be rectified, is but to heap reproach upon self. Reproach not self nor others. Let thy yeas be yeas. Oh, let thy yeas be yeas and thy nays be nays. Learn when to say yes and when to say nay. The self is so essential to love that any self-healer must know that Cayce wisely stresses this relationship constantly. But if he does not want us to condemn self, to heap guilt upon ourselves, so too he points out that love is not justifying self either. Know that if and when the Lord is with thee, ye are already in the great majority. Ye are then glorifying the Lord, not attempting to justify self, for justifying self is blaming someone else. Love is not being a doormat either. To allow others to take advantage of self or a situation is to do them a disservice, says Cayce. To be sure, patience, long-suffering, and endurance are in their respective manners urges that would lead to virtues, but they cease to be a virtue when the individual entity allows self merely to be imposed upon and to take a second place merely because someone else of a more aggressive nature imposes. Love is not judging others. Love does not judge, it simply observes. Then be not too quick on thy judgments of others. Put thyself in their place in thy mind before ye pass judgment on others. But judgments of morality, judgments of activity through those periods of the past would not be in the same class as in the present. Though truth and morality is ever the same, the outward application of same has changed as man's application of ideals as related to same has changed. Ye have the ability to judge things. It is well to judge things. It is bad to judge yourself or your fellow man. Whatever the activities may be, whether pertaining to a washing machine or a flying machine, it is well to judge its abilities to serve man. For the injunction to man is to subdue the earth. Then all the powers of creation are in the hands of man, and ye are a very good one to handle much of these. But know that these abilities are lent thee by a divine power, who made thee Lord of any soul. Now that we have possibly clarified what love is not, Cayce wants us to know what love is. Seek to know indeed what love is, for there is a star of hope only in those who seek to manifest love, whether of a spiritual, mental, or even material import. In such there is hope, and without it little hope or little stability. For the self-healer, it is important to realize that Cayce teaches that love is being of service. For it is not by chance that any individual soul enters, but that God hath need of thee at this time. They then that begin to pity themselves or wonder what it is all about lose the real purpose of love, that ye may make manifest the love he hath chosen to give thee. In every way and manner present self and self-service for the service's sake and not for self's sake. See? All these old-timey words. Love is being humble. That, as Cayce tells us, does not mean putting oneself down or condemning self. Rather, it is accepting what is true about the self and working from there to improve. The entity, often through other influences, as we shall see, rather belittles self's abilities. Humbleness is well, but who lighteth the candle and putteth it under a bushel? Humbleness does not mean then degrading nor becoming discouraged when self has been refused, that which according to the principles of self is debased by those that should be, are in the position to be, helpful experiences in the affairs of the entity. Love is having faith and trust. It is really sharing the good things about the self with others and thereby healing the wounds of mind, body, and spirit that threaten us all. And when ye trust in him, ye are sure and need never be afraid of the material things. For does he not feed the birds of the air? Does he not give the color to the lily, the incense to the violet? How much more... I'm sorry, my elderly cat was doing something cute. You're cute, Phoebe. How much more is it that as may be in his very presence, if ye apply self to become worthy of acceptance in his home? Confidence then is of the material or of the physical sense, while faith is an attribute of the soul and spiritual body. The self-healing path then is composed of love, for it is healing to admit to self and others that you are wrong. Love prompts that. Love is being sorry enough so that one does not ever want to do wrong again. The readings are very positive toward the need and effectiveness of admitting one's own imperfections and wrongs. Love is so being that others find us easy to forgive. For in confession is purification, and through purification we open up the channels of blessings to others. Because then a channel of blessings to others, and thus may the beauties of the heavenly forces as may be expressed in such be thine very own. Beauty for beauty's sake, love that it may be the manifestation of not bodily emotions, but rather that show forth his activity in and among men. Cayce once told a person that all love is expressed in the freshness of the Savior's command. A new commandment I give, that ye love one another. Cayce used many examples to portray his concept of love. He said that love is sharing, filling the other's cup. He says that love is attempting to give what best is needed by another individual. Love is being able to stand the truth about yourself. Love is being God's will on earth. Love is being able to bear whatever you have asked for. Love is seeking God in all that exists. Love is being a light of love to others. For flowers will love the entity as the entity loves the flowers. Very few would ever find it in themselves to wither while about or on this body. If perfect love casts out fear, Cayce has done his best to ensure that we as self-healers never know the meaning of fear. He has lighted our pathway to love, and his own life was a living testimony to the love that he bore towards us all. He was a good example for the children of the earth. He stood up and spoke out for what he believed in. He accepted others as they were, not how he would like them to be. He was respectful of others' thoughts and privacy. He gave of himself with no strings attached, with no need of expectation or reward. For he knew that love was sufficient unto love, and that virtue should be its only needed reward. Through his life, Cayce proved the value of his teachings. That would be the lesson of love that he bequeaths to all those of us who would embark upon the richness of self-healing. True, one must become selfless, but to have knowledge and withhold same from others is not always best. Be willing ever to give account of the reason for the faith that lies within. Don't be afraid to speak of the same. Okay, that was chapter 12. Thank you for joining me. I'm not going to act like I remember which part or like where in the chapter specifically, but I think it's interesting that I said in the last video one of my personal New Year's resolutions was just simply stop the negative self-talk, because it's now reading this chapter, it is rooted in fear. It's that I have had so many people tell me that I can't do something, that I look this way, that I should act this way, and it's affected me for a long time now, for almost for over 2 decades, and that's long enough. And now I have a little girl that is going to mimic me. She mimics me and my boyfriend to the T, and I don't want her to even feel energetically me doubting myself when I actually know my worth. Because there is a difference with knowing your worth and actually putting what your worth is to use. And I don't want that for her. I'm intentionally making sure that as much as humanly possible, I don't give that to her. My boyfriend doesn't have a lot of fears. He may be fearful of like very minute things, but me, I do have a lot of fears, and I don't want to give that to her. That's not fair. That's not giving her a running start or a chance at life, starting fresh and believing in herself. I don't want that for her. I don't want that for any adult child that may come across this video. I wish nothing but self-confidence within you to go spread love to others. But I'm not going to ramble too much. I love you guys. Please believe in yourself. Make sure that every single day you do something that does make you uncomfortable, because getting out of your comfort zone is imperative with growth. Yeah. I'm going to just wrap it up. Take care, guys. See you.